But you think about things and
So
prioritize. Where do you want to spend your money when things are so?
can I give a
hot?
preview of our editors roundtable?
Yeah, do
Okay,
it.
Matt Bosler had a really good point. He writes about the Fed for Bloomberg News and Bloomberg Business. We can talk about demand destruction when oil prices and gas prices get to a certain level. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's in our weekend radio show and podcast. You can find that Saturday morning and also at our podcast feed. It's also a special, in-depth, and lengthy discussion. It's great.
Let's head to Washington, D.C. for a check the latest world and national news. Nancy Lyons is standing by. Hey there, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. President Biden is banning the import of seafood, spirits, and diamonds from Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. This means no more caviar and vodka from that country. Biden is also calling for Congress to remove favored nation status, which makes it very hard for Russia to do business with the U.S. But Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba tells Bloomberg there's more that could be done.
Close all Western ports for Russian vessels and for foreign vessels trying to bring goods to Russia from those ports. Interrupt supply chains. Make Russia feel full isolation.
And Dmitry Kuleba tells Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern no progress was gained during talks he had yesterday with Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, even though Vladimir Putin today said there were some positive steps from those discussions. Well, it appears President Biden and congressional Democrats have lost ground to Republicans on several issues weighing on the minds of voters.
The Wall Street Journal poll finds 57% of voters unhappy with President Biden's job performance, despite favorable marks for the president's response to Russia and the State of the Union speech. Republicans are gaining ground on issues including education, the COVID-19 response, and the economy. Voters say the economy is the most important issue, followed by the war in Ukraine. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The massive South by Southwest Festival is back in person today for the first time since the pandemic began. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in our 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic. Great story by our Katrina Manson. Talks about the technology world walling off Russia like never before, but that does pose some risks for the United States.
Yeah, the campaign to starve Russia of technology, stripping the nation of everything from iPhones to Airbnb listings to defense electronics, is an unprecedented experiment that risks pushing Vladimir Putin further into China's orbit.
Yeah, and this is why you've got to look at everything. And this is why I keep bringing up China when I'm watching it in terms of the equity trade. Using export controls as a tool, the U.S. is leading an effort to deprive Russia of components it needs for high-end industry and advanced weapons with the hopes of ensuring that President Putin feels the pain of his decision to invade Ukraine. That has forced makers of computers, chips, and sensors to halt shipments to Russia.
At the same time, Carol, many of the biggest U.S. companies have gone even further, effectively establishing a tech boycott of the nation. The idea, encouraged by Ukrainian leaders, is that depriving Russians of access to technology and digital platforms will spur popular protests and undermine Putin's military campaign.
Yeah, so we've never done this. No one has really attempted modern technological isolation on this scale before. It's hard to say how Russia's 140 million people will ultimately respond, but cutting Russians adrift from online services may undermine pro-democracy activists seeking to organize anti-war protests, and perhaps most crucially, it threatens to drive Russia closer to America's rivals, most notably China. We have talked so much in this, I hate to call it conflict because it's a war, it's a Russian invasion of Ukraine, but we've seen the alliance between Russia and China specifically, and China increasingly amping up its role when it comes to technology innovation and certainly production.
There's no historical parallel here. We don't know what happens.
No.
I mean, you can think of entire societies and countries that are shut off from technology, like North Korea, for example, but what they didn't have was this technology before. So if you're in Russia and you had access to your payment systems, your cash, McDonald's, the apps and services that you started using a lot, and you no longer have access to those, what does it mean?
Right, but also what does it mean, and then have a huge kind of safety net perhaps in China is a big difference.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World, Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pallett. Stocks are slipping lower. 43 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. What a week. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks are now in the red after a positive start with the Dow currently down 76 points. S&P's dropped 31. NASDAQ is lower by 200. The U.S. 10-year-old at 2%. Gold is down 9. Oil is trading higher. And Bitcoin is lower by 1.4%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, all are now in the red, led by declines in telecom, consumer discretionary, and tech. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, McDonald's, Caterpillar, and Dow Inc., while Apple, JP Morgan, and Nike led to the downside. In other news, Deutsche Bank says it's in the process of winding down remaining Russian operations, and JP Morgan is the biggest counterparty for that nickel tycoon's short bets. Also, Chobani is delaying its IPO until the second half of 2022 or early 2023. Wrapping things up, after earnings, Oracle gained as much as 4%, reversing losses of 3.5%. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg Times Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pallett. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We do want to get to our weekly crypto segment because this week, President Biden is signing an executive order directing government agencies to focus more on the fast-growing crypto market, from researching a U.S. digital dollar to combating illicit finance. The White House saying on Wednesday, calling on all agencies across the government to coordinate what's thus far been a kind of scattershot approach to the asset class. However, I got to say, Tim, it falls short of providing clear direction when it comes to regulation. Kind of missing.
Speaking of direction, we saw Bitcoin surge on Wednesday after this news came out, which was actually before the executive order came out. That's an entirely different story, though. Carol, Thursday it sold off a little bit, and today we're actually seeing it lower by just a little bit. Danelle Dixon is CEO and Executive Director of Stellar Development Foundation. Danelle joins us once again from Oakland, California. Danelle, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you both?
Oh, doing well. I should note that Stellar Development Foundation is a nonprofit. It uses blockchain tech to help unlock the world's potential by making money more fluid and opening up markets and more. Let's start with this executive order. What does the White House executive order mean for the crypto industry?
It's just such an opportunity for the crypto industry. I think that what it shows is that there's been so much progress that we've made domestically in the U.S. with the administration as well as with policymakers and regulators to make them pay attention to this particular market and this industry as a whole. And what I'm hopeful that we can get out of this, because it would be amazing for us to have a lot more clarity around the rules of engagement for each of these agencies so that there's a lot more specificity around what their lanes of operation are. And I think that that's going to just eliminate some of the concern that we see in the ecosystem broadly for blockchain and cryptocurrency about how to operate.
You know, sometimes you have to do something to nudge and get things going. Because I'm wondering about executive order, which can be overturned, right? We know how this works, versus some kind of congressional or regulatory action. So is it a good kind of, administrative step, coming from the U.S. government to kind of get the ball rolling in a more serious way?
Well, the things that I loved about the order, one of them was the fact that it demonstrated and it said very specifically that the United States wants to continue to have leadership on global financial services and specifically on digital assets. That's huge. That's a really important statement to make because that's one of the things that we've been asking over and over to maintain our leadership here. And so I think that that particular statement carries a lot of weight, and it's going to get these agencies to focus on making sure that they're looking at the activity and understanding what part of the activity they need to consider that they need to regulate around. So I do think it's a really nice first step. I think we're still going to see activity at the policymaker level with respect to particularly, I think, stablecoins this year. I think that's the low-hanging fruit and a really important part of this puzzle that we need to see sort of act all together. But I think that having an executive order and telling these agencies, hey, this is an important space for us, we can't lose sight of it, and we can't fall behind, is really what I see as an important takeaway.
Danelle, what about when it comes to if some of these companies should start to get concerned at all that the scrutiny is going to be on them? It's interesting because on one hand, I think a lot of them are going to welcome some sort of clear guidance, at least from regulators, but at the same time, are any of the business models at risk?
So I don't know whether to think about it from that standpoint. Here's what I'd like to think about it from, and this is what I would tell any of these companies out there, and many of them we work with in the industry holistically. One of the things that we did wrong on the content side of the web years and years ago when privacy sort of came out as being one of those things to think about is we told regulators and policymakers, we don't need your attention, we don't need your help, we've got this. We know how to do this as an industry. And the truth is, as you can see today, we didn't. And we didn't know how to do that necessarily as well as maybe we could have. And so we've learned our lesson there. And so I think now is the opportunity for us to engage with these regulators and these policymakers and these administrative agencies to help them to understand the value and the benefit of what this technology and all these tools that are being built are providing to the individual consumers and to businesses alike, domestically and globally. So I see this as an opportunity for engagement. And sure, there might be scrutiny on certain things, but it's our opportunity to explain what the value is so that you can balance the value with the challenge of understanding these business models. So I ultimately see this as this is our time to sort of demonstrate what we can do for the global financial system. And I think that that's going to be a huge step in favor of blockchain and cryptocurrency generally.
Danelle, we constantly talk about financial innovation platforms that hopefully make things more equal in terms of access. We just did a story about Wells Fargo and mortgages for Black Americans and those that, in terms of where they are in the economic strata have, good incomes, success, some would say financially, and yet are being turned down when it comes to, refinancing your mortgage. So I do wonder how realistically will something like crypto be something that moves us in a big way towards more equality financially? And just got about 40 seconds left. left.
Yeah, I really do think that this is the opportunity for crypto and blockchain to shine. I think we can shine domestically and internationally. The notion of not having to have those minimum balance requirements, the notion of not having to have some of the fees that are attached to it, and the requirement that there's just a competitive advantage for figuring out how to do this better, cheaper, and faster for all consumers. I always say the financial sector is right now focused on the many, on the few, and we need it to be focused on the many. And I think that's what blockchain and crypto can do. So I see not just promise, but real active use cases that are doing that today.
All right, well, cool. So we will obviously reach out to you as things progress, and fingers crossed that this does play out the way that you just said. Danelle Dixon, she is CEO and Executive Director of Stellar Development Foundation. Interesting organization, a nonprofit that use blockchain to unlock economic potential by making money more fluid, markets more open, and people more empowered. That's their website. I'm reading from it, but that's their mission as well, too.
Yeah, Bitcoin, by the way, down 1.3% today.
Moves around, right?
Yeah.
Or so I hear.
It certainly does.
All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Yeah, it's Friday, and this is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston. Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco. Bloomberg 960. To the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yeah, this is Bloomberg Business Week, the Friday edition. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic, live at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City.
It's back.
Chart of the day.
The chart of the day.
What's she doing?
I'm guessing it's about oil.
Guessing it's about oil.
Yeah.
Did you cheat?
I cheated a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk oil with Kriti Gupta in just a moment. Meantime, let's talk about the markets. It's another rough day, risk-off trade here. If you're short in the market, Charlie Pellet, you maybe are doing okay, but not if you're going long here.
Indeed, and we've got 28 minutes to go ahead of the bell. Red on the screen. Listen, when we started broadcasting this afternoon, at least Bloomberg Business Week, we had the Dow higher. Right now, looking at the Dow, worst level of the day, tumbling 124 right now, lower by 0.4%. S&P down 39, drop now of 0.9%. NASDAQ, as we bring in the music, down 230 points, drop there of 1.75%. 10-year down 430 seconds, 10-year yield 2.00%. Spot gold down 0.6, 19.84 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 3.1%, 109.27 a barrel. Brent 112.73. Brent, the global benchmark, up now by 3.1%. Stocks fell as risk sentiment deteriorated after Ukraine's top diplomat said he did not see the progress in Russian-Ukrainian talks. As for the market backdrop, Emily Rowland is strategist at JH Investments.
So until we see a significant deterioration in economic growth, which frankly we're not seeing in the data, we just added 700,000 jobs to the U.S. economy. PMIs are still very elevated. Earnings estimates continue to move higher. We're very, kind of cautiously optimistic here that there is an opportunity to add positions.
DD Global's ADRs are plunging after the company suspended preparations for its planned Hong Kong listing. The decision came as the Cyberspace Administration of China informed executives of the ride-hailing giant that their proposals to prevent security and data leaks had fallen short of requirements. DD Global shares, they're plunging now by 43.6%. Finally, public health experts of the World Health Organization have begun discussing how and when to call an end to the global COVID-19 crisis. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie breaking down the markets, and I am watching the trade here, Tim. The equity trade, we're seeing some selling into the close. So we are at our lows of the session on those major equity averages. If I look at the major industry group, doing the best, but everything is down across the board. Broad-based selling. Utilities still down, though, about 0.2%. But we're just seeing some selling into the close here ahead of the weekend.
Yeah, tech stocks once again under pressure. Kel, the NASDAQ 100 down about 1.8%. It's being pulled down by a broad sell-off. In terms of the NASDAQ 100, you have only 11 stocks of the 100 in there in the green right now. Apple is the worst performer on a points basis, pulling it down. Tesla, Microsoft, Facebook, Meta platforms, I should say. NVIDIA, Adobe, Google, Netflix, and Starbucks all dragging it lower.
Yeah, and if I look at the week, I mean, energy still holding up about 2% for the week overall. We know the volatility. We've seen some mega swings throughout the week based on the news out of Ukraine and that Russian invasion, but that has certainly roiled the energy market. So energy as a whole up about 2% this week. Bottom of the pack, though, is those consumer staples names. They're down about 5.6%. And then you talk about big tech, information technology is down about 3.5% for the week. So that's where we've seen an intensity in selling. We saw, though, at one point investors come back into the market. We talked about maybe it was a recent, bottom, and so investors saw some opportunities, but we are being very cautious. I think so are strategists, not necessarily ready to call a bottom here when it comes to the equity trade.
Yeah, we certainly heard that from Abigail Doolittle earlier this week as well. Let's get now to Kriti Gupta, who's standing by with her chart of the day. You can sign up for Kriti's chart of the day. You do that at kgupta129 at bloomberg.net. Also, check her out on Twitter and Instagram at Kriti Gupta News. Kriti, your chart of the day after a few days hiatus because you were working so hard in Houston at the huge oil conference. What's your chart of the day today?
Yeah, well, I kind of decided I'm going to wrap up everything I learned in Houston and kind of put it into one chart, and that's really where I got the inspiration for my chart. It basically shows U.S. oil output. As we talk about the impact of Russian sanctions and what that really means, a lot of the interviews I really had was, where do you go for this alternate source of oil? And a lot of people are looking, obviously, to the American energy sector. The United States is officially a kind of net importer, or net exporter, so that's going to be a really important part of the conversation moving forward. We know that there's this kind of tug of war between the Biden administration, which is telling kind of producers to ramp up production, and producers are saying, well, we can't, we have supply chain issues. So my chart of the day basically shows that after that big kind of drop in production that you saw in 2020, they are kind of ramping back up, but that takes time. And if you actually look at the trend line, it shows that we're still far from getting back to 2019 levels, and even further from replacing that lost Russian supply.
Okay, Kriti, I don't want to speak out of my lane much, but I've been digging into oil production in the United States in recent days as a result of this, and my understanding has become...
You basically has found some new Bloomberg functionality, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Thanks to Carolyn Romaine showing me all the tricks on the terminal. But do we have the equipment here in the United States to actually refine the type of oil that we extract with hydraulic fracturing?
That is a very tough question.
Yeah.
To use hydraulic fracturing.
Well,
but yes, we do. We do have that ability. And the point you're bringing up here is, are we still able to get our hands on heavy crude, essentially the kind that you refine to turn into things like jet fuel, like asphalt for new roads and things like that, which, by the way, is going to be a big part of the kind of fallout of the Biden infrastructure plan if it gets through. But yes, we do have those capabilities. What we don't have is the amount of light crude, essentially the kind you use for the plastics, et cetera. It's not a function necessarily of refining. It's a function of getting that raw material. But to your point on refining, we're in March, which is really kind of the low point of when refining kind of picks up. From here on out, you're going to start to see a lot more demand from those refiners ahead of kind of driving season in the